And I'll call the hearing to order, which is a special hearing that is established to review the outputs of Du Bois and King associated with the WIP grant for our culvert scope study for the Kent Hill Road culvert. And we've got CVRPC and Du Bois and King here, and robust representation of the public. And the select board members who are all here. So we've got Bill Davis, Jordan Keys, Jamie Morby, and Barbara McAndrews. So I think Bill and maybe Barbara are new since the kind of start of this project. But other than that, I'll hand it over to Andy to do an intro of kind of what we've got so far for the project. That works.
Thank you. Yep. So my name is Andy Hoke. I'm with Du Bois and King. I've been working on this project since 2023.
Yeah, I think so.
So appreciate all your patience in getting this project wrapped up. So I want to give a quick presentation, leave enough time for some questions and discussion, but I just want to provide the summary of our analysis. I do have hard copies of the draft report, if that would be helpful to anyone.
I think we're all pretty well set with the electronic versions, but yeah, thanks. Might take one, but.
So the next slide is just an overview of the work that we completed. Obviously, we were looking at existing flooding conditions at the Kent Hill Road culvert. We took a look at the morphology of the brook, assessed the condition of the existing culvert, and were able to develop the hydrologic and hydraulic model for the brook and evaluate the hydraulic capacity of the culvert. The main objective here is to develop a number of alternatives for the town that would reduce flooding damages in this vicinity. Okay. Next slide there. Okay, so our field investigation included a site-specific topographic survey. Like I said, we got inverts on the culvert dimensions, performed several stream cross sections, both upstream and downstream of the culvert. Where observable, we obtained high water marks. And then we also included a subsurface investigation. So we completed 3 borings just to evaluate soil conditions, make sure that we weren't running into any significant issues with the potential replacement. The quick summary there was, we encountered sand and gravel, basically from ground surface down to around 15, 16 feet. There was a thin glacial till layer of about 2 feet, and then on bedrock. So actually pretty good conditions for potential replacement. Okay, we established the hydrology at the culvert location. So our watershed area is a little over 11 square miles. Overall stream slope of around 2%. And we utilized these flow values for the bankful width storm, roughly equivalent of a 1.5-year storm at 315 CFS cubic feet per second, 50-year storm at 1300 CFS, and the 100-year storm at 1600 CFS. So these values were then plugged into our hydraulic model using HEC-RAS. I don't know if you're familiar with this program or not. Produced by U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, basically a finite element model where we establish a mesh for the project area where you have individual cells, smaller cell size at areas where the stream is transitioning quickly, larger cell areas, and the broader floodplain area. And that's all run through a routine in the HEC-RAS model, and produces various output for you. The ones that we look at most commonly are flood depth and flood velocity, and I'll have a few examples of that here in a second. Hold on one second. The other important inputs with the model are land cover. So we look at, what portions of the drainage area or watershed areas, forest, grassland, open water, all of which, controls the amount of flow and the velocity of flow that allows it to culvert. Good. All right. So just for comparison's sake, we pulled up the format for the project area. Area in blue represents the flood hazard area, or equivalent of the 100-year flood limits, or inundation limits. Maybe noteworthy here is when you look at the left bank, which would be facing downstream to the left, you can see here that the area of blue extends to the left bank. Now, we know that the topography rises up in that area, and our model shows just the opposite of this happening. So if we toggle into the next slide, we'll be able to see this. So because we were able to obtain, a site-specific survey, merge that with available LiDAR data, I think this is closer to what you're probably experiencing in the field here, where during peak flow periods, heavy precipitation events, and when the culvert is clogged or overwhelmed with flow, that it actually is bypassing along the swale on the north side of Kent Hill Road and then overtopping the road right where we're at now. So what you're looking at here is the 100-year storm existing conditions.
100 years and assuming a clog in the culvert, or that's clear.
But you would expect the same condition to occur if debris or clogging was occurring. Yeah. So this is just a profile of Kent Hill Road to just kind of help understand what the situation is here. So the existing culvert, I should have mentioned this earlier, is a corrugated metal pipe in dimensions 10 feet wide by 7.5 feet tall. All right. Based on the surveyed inverts and top of pipe, you can see that the top of pipe is actually at or slightly above the low sag in Kent Hill Road right here. So again, if the culvert becomes overwhelmed, flows are going to head down Kent Hill and over top of this location. Okay, so we developed 3 different alternatives, all of which utilized a similar hydraulic opening or dimension. So part of the measurements that we did in the field were establishing bank full width. So like I said, the existing culvert is only 10 feet wide. Our measured bank full width, and the state of Vermont wants us to size any new culvert to at least meet that dimension, was 24 feet. Mm-hmm. All right, we took a number of measurements both upstream and downstream and averaged that value. So 24 feet wide is the important dimension. Additionally, we wanted to increase the vertical hydraulic opening, so we bumped that up from 7.5 to 9 feet. The dimensions remain the same for all 3 alternatives. You'll see shortly in the results that seemed to be an adequate size to pass with the 50 and the 100-year storm, with some variations. Okay. All right. So I actually merged the results for all 3 alternatives onto a single slide here because, at least for our viewing purposes in this room, there is very, very little difference in the visual presentation of the results. So I thought it was appropriate just to show this for all 3 alternatives. And as you can see, this is the 100-year storm. Implementing any one of the 3 alternatives, we're able to maintain flow within the channel, avoid the situation where we have bypass flows exiting into the northerly swale and overtopping the road. So like I said, I think that is the dimension that you're looking for, 24 feet by 9.5.
So can we go back to that for a second? So this is just assuming the input of water flow coming from the drainage area up this way. Is that correct? So I think CVRBC helped us with doing like or coordinating a hydrologic study of the stream that went up Helmsley. Is that right?
That was the agency transportation, did a hydraulic study for the culvert draining. It's a different watershed, right? They merge.
They merge down below, yeah.
And
I just wonder like what this kind of backup looks like relative to the same event impacting this and then coming down into this area, you know, that is, you know, a pretty compelling representation of how things would improve. Obviously, if there's anything coming down from that one watershed, but
it is accounted for in the models.
oh, it is, okay.
You know, we were focused on the actual culvert location for the HEC-RAS model, but we also account for other tributaries and just assign a steady state condition. So basically we say, well, let's assume, you know, 100 CFS is coming in from this trib throughout the whole duration of the model.
Gotcha.
So it is accounted for.
Okay.
The only difference is, you know, on our stream, we see the hydraulic curve, meaning, you know, the ramping up of the flows, elevation and drawing down. So the tributary is accounted for as just a steady state.
Gotcha.
Okay, so this slide is giving us velocities. Hotter colors being the faster velocity, cooler colors being slow. Again, existing conditions. So you can see once that culvert overtops, we have swift flows in that northerly swale. And then for comparison, the three alternatives. And I'm sorry, I should have given you a better description of the three alternatives as I ran through those. So alternative one is a 24-foot by 9.5-foot culvert. Open bottom culvert. So unlike this one, which is, you know, full round or full arched, this would be an open bottom, which I think is also a preferred configuration here because the existing culvert actually is over steepened. The stream coming into the culvert enters at around 4%. The culvert is sloped at 6%. And as you know, we're transitioning into the floodplain and we're down around 1% once we exit the culvert. The open bottom is going to be improved aquatic organism passage. What will happen is we'll actually be able to establish a more geomorphological compatible stream slope. So basically that slope will match what's upstream of it. We'll get closer to that 4% grade.
We don't have double color of rocks, is what we're saying.
That's right.
And would that assume that the foundation then for that kind of arch would be down to bedrock and then the base of the stream would be established by
or very close. It might be, we may be able to get away with, in the till layer. But like I said, the till layer is only 2 feet, so you might be just as well off going right down to bedrock. That'll all be determined as part of the, the design, actual design. Let's see, that was alternative one. Alternative two, same dimensions, 24 by 9.5, but a concrete box culvert. So instead of the corrugated metal, just a 3-sided box, open bottom, similar to what we were talking about, the arch. And then alternative three is actually a bridge. So, a span of, I think the total span is 55 feet, but the actual hydraulic opening would be the same 24 by 9.5. Okay. So hopefully folks can read these numbers. This is a comparison of the hydraulic performance for the three alternatives. So what we see here is for the 50-year storm, and that's the top half of the table there, is all three alternatives are able to pass the 50-year storm with available space below the low chord in the culvert. And you can see 0.7 feet for alternative one, 1.7 for two, and 1.5 for three. When we bump up to the 100-year storm, alternative one does fill up all the way. In fact, it doesn't overtop the road. It doesn't result in any flow into a swale or overtopping of the road, but we do exceed the top elevation of the culvert. And the other two alternatives too is 0.9 feet of available space below the low chord and a foot for alternative three. So from a hydraulic performance standpoint, 2 and 3 are preferred, but the real world condition here of exceeding the top of the low chord for alternative one, I don't think would be problematic.
What is the lifespan of alternative one?
So that's sort of baked into this and our BCA, but for a CNP culvert like that, we would normally assume about a 50-year lifespan.
Okay. You said?
50 years.
50.
Yeah. Okay, we put together some preliminary costs for the various alternatives. You can see increasing costs as we work through each of the successive alternatives. The top line number there includes a 25% contingency. So, there are plenty of unknowns at this point. This is just a scope and study. We don't know what the actual design will be yet. So we bake in, a healthy contingency. And then the following lines are just our estimates of what the engineering design and construction phase would be. So that represents engineering design is like 15% of the total construction cost with the contingency in, and then the construction phase, resident engineering, I think I assumed 8% there. So there's definitely a level of conservatism baked into all these numbers now. Okay, then we took a look at just, the relative benefit or of each of the alternatives, kind of rank them based on their hydraulic performance, cost, environmental impacts. Like I said, from a hydraulic standpoint, alternative 2 and 3 are probably the best. Similar environmental impacts and right-of-way issues for all three alternatives. Perhaps one of the considerations that would come into play here is the duration of construction. Alternative 1 and 2 should be able to be constructed fairly quickly, whereas if we're talking about a bridge, that's going to be a longer road closure. So in the end, our recommendation to the town is to move forward with alternative 1, primarily because of the lower cost in comparison to a nearly similar hydraulic performance. So we think that that'll give a healthy service life and a much improved performance over what you're experiencing right now. That's a quick summary.
So I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but we're 10th of a mile up the road, it's culvert just like that on the road. That got washed out in 1984, and all the water came down here and flooded this place. Took the whole road out.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do here, we have to do there too, right? I mean,
Is it the
same volume,
same size?
same volume. Well, I think it's even. I don't think it's 7 feet in the middle. I don't.
Yeah.
I've never got in there and stood up, but I don't believe it's 7 feet.
Yeah, that's always a consideration. You make one improvement and that could have a repercussion, usually for the downstream culverts, right? Because all of a sudden you're increasing the hydraulic capacity at this location, then subsequent all of this could be impacted. A situation like you're describing, you know, you have a catastrophic failure of an upstream culvert. Certainly would have, you know, impacts or damages during that event, but the whole idea here is to increase the hydraulic capacity. I can't speak to, you know, what would happen during an event like that, but, you know, this is sized for your larger storm events and should be an improvement over what they are.
Well, I'll keep being a Debbie Downer. I don't mind playing that role. I think obviously, I mean, it's been great that we've been able to pursue the scoping of this project, you know, through a grant. And this is a lot of good, useful information that will inform a decision around how to address this. The big question is funding, and the current reality of likely not being able to find a grant, or at the very least, those grant funds being highly competitive, knowing that there are a lot of other communities that are going to have pretty high priority projects. So I guess my question is how good is this data for how long? I'm assuming a lot of that's based on the modeling inputs, and I'd hope that it could withstand, you know, several years of deferred decision making on implementation, but it would still we'd be able to retain it as a useful kind of scope and direction for the project for 5 years, 10 years.
Yeah, unless there's some significant change within the watershed, then
Okay.
you know, the results should be reasonably accurate. Yeah. One other thing that I want to mention, you know, part of the scope was the benefit cost analysis, the FEMA BCA.
Yeah.
And we ran those numbers, and it came out favorably. We had a ratio of like 1.28 or something like that. The analysis that we used was based on the road routine or traffic routine within the BCA. So really all I was doing was making a comparison of the travels or the trips that would be diverted, and, you know, calculate the amount of time and expense and gas, all that. And that came out favorably. If you included damages to the town hall, I think that would probably improve your BCA ratio even more. And might position you, you know, in a better spot for funding sources. So.
Well, the other thing that kind of comes to mind is the realization that the section of Kent Hill, then up into North Calais, and then over Foster Hill, arguably not that important, but is part of that federal highway aid application, which has much more generous reimbursement terms for repairs. I don't think it covers any kind of proactive repair, but should there have been a catastrophic failure of some sort, it would open up that access to that particular pool. That is, I don't believe that's controlled by FEMA, right? That's
ruled by federal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be most likely emergency repairs could receive 100% first 270 days, and then 90%. It's a 90-10 split.
Yeah.
This would probably end up, if it were to fail, go to a permanent project, which would be more on that 90-10 split.
But that program doesn't do mitigation?
No, it doesn't do mitigation, but you know, if it were to fail, you definitely have a lot of conversations about that.
Which then brings me back to thinking whether or not we're assuming a lot, but assuming we're comfortable with the risk of the closure and having to do a repair, if we're also willing to assume the risk of potential impacts to the structure in the event of something like that. having a scope and design prepared for immediate replacement to this standard would be a fairly conservative position to fiscally conservative
Well,
position
the
to.
engineering for the design was quite expensive, so.
Right. Well, does this include a design? This is just
This is just.
current state and alternatives. Yeah, it doesn't count as a design.
Right, this was 30%, right? So I think-
Well, I call them conceptual plans. I would not
Not
consider
even,
them
okay.
30%. It's really, it's a depiction. It's
Gotcha.
what the engineer.
It's a good enough depiction, that any engineering firm could pick one of those up. You've got the modeling completely there, so they can take that and develop a full design, for all this. Yeah, you have basically all that initial groundwork already done.
Mhm. Just trying to be a little sensitive to time, but so I guess the primary objective here is to kind of close out this portion of the project so that we can close out the brick grant work, or at least so CVRPC can close out the grant work. Thank you for all the work, and thank you to CVRPC for helping us identify the project and get it funded. Is there anything on our end left to do to help kind of close that out, or action items that we
I
need
guess
to
from
consider?
usually in the report list, one of those alternatives, if you could just, you don't, like, it's not locking you in anything, but just saying if you had it preferred of the three alternatives that you agreed with the engineer, just so we can, in the reporting, we'll be asked that.
It's safe to say we prefer the least expensive.
The least expensive.
I think that's a fair assessment.
And if you do come up with additional questions or comments or thoughts on the report, I only issued that as a draft. So I need to finalize it. There are a couple of revisions that I need to make in there already. So let me know if you find anything that you'd like additional discussion.
Great. Thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions about the project or next step?
Just mentioned that Keith offered to keep us in mind as he's coming across different grant opportunities. You mentioned this would probably require more than one grant.
Right.
Yeah, if we were to fund it, just,
Right.
sunny day in funding.
Yeah.
I figured probably put together a funding package, see if we can, both use, possibly clean water service provider or, organism passage funding.
Yeah.
Put together a couple to try to lower that overall cost to the community.
I was also wondering about the historic preservation piece. If
Right.
there's, I don't know if there's anyone funding that intersection of,
Generally not.
Infrastructure and
After this project.
to protect what they've already invested in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, I'm not aware of any current.
Well, thank you for the time, Keith and Andy. I appreciate it.
Really appreciate the slides, because I did look at the report, but it was,
Yeah.
great to have an expert put it in. perspective.
Yes, that made all the difference. Thank you.
Another quick question, I guess. So, knowing that like a lot of the flood area designations and floodplains tends to be kind of like rough in from like a LiDAR perspective or satellite footage. Like I know that there's a process for providing better data points to modify those state level maps. Is that, for one, I guess, is that an accurate characterization of like how flexible those maps can be? I'm just wondering, like, there are a couple of parcels adjacent to this, ours included. It looks like that would actually make it kind of worse for us in that 100-year flood scenario, having the hydrologic model showing that things are spilling over the road and through the building, hopefully around it. But it did significantly change, what could be interpreted as impacts on the east side of the river. has anybody been using those models, or can those models be used for modifying those floodplains?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
So we have to go through the FEMA, GOMAR process, so we have map revision. I'm sorry, I don't remember the date on the firm map, but oftentimes those are
Yeah, me
dated.
neither.
You know, they relied on old topographic information.
Yeah.
That's exactly why you see that sort of
Yeah.
situation. So you would need to present the results of the development model to FEMA. They would have to accept it and generate a GOMAR application
Okay,
to remove the problem.
gotcha. All right, thank you.
Do we want to take a copy or two from any?
I'll leave all of these.
Oh, great. Thank you. Save the gas mileage, right?
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Kenny.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
FEMA flood maps, just for your awareness, are, this has been dragging on because they wanted to include the flood of 23.
Yeah.
So, since I've been at CPRPC, which is about 3 years, we've been talking about this, and, but theoretically, we're supposed to have the new FEMA flood maps within the next year. Like I said, they were supposed to roll out, but in the winter after 23,
Yeah.
wanting to include that flood information. So we should be getting new FEMA flood maps that are line-based this time.
okay,
So they should be much more accurate than the previous ones.
great. That's good to know. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, as soon as those working maps come out, actually the town will be notified directly, because they never will have a chance to view them. There'll be a work session where that's.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Keith. Thanks.
Thanks again.
Thanks. Yeah, have a good evening. So with that,
We should close out there.
yeah, so with that, we'll adjourn the hearing. Wouldn't hurt to probably have that as a vote. Do I have a motion to? Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.